I'm Frank Romano, and they asked me to introduce this segment, mainly because I was here and had nothing else to do. 2013 is the 20th anniversary of the introduction of digital color printing with the Indigo machine. It ushered in a new era for the printing industry and changed the way we print. I go back to the letterpress days, 1959, when offset lithography was just coming in. In fact, there were articles written in 1959 that said offset lithography is only good for quick and dirty printing. And digital printing had to live through that part of their era as well. But no matter what they say, there is still going to be print in some form. I recall in the 1970s when Wang said that offices would be paperless. And of course you know that offices today are Wangless. And you even have Google telling us to go paperless. We should tell everyone to go Googleless. In any case, our conversation today is with Benny Landa. His name is his title, because when you say his name, you are talking about the future of the printing industry. So I give you Guy and Benny and a conversation about digital printing.
Well, Guy, let me say, first of all, I'm really honored and privileged to have been invited to be here with you, and thank you very much for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. So I want to start with the first question, and it's really my first question because, I don't know, it was about 18 months ago that somebody told me, you know, Benny Landa is coming back with a new company, new technology, and I picked up the phone and call you. And, you know, you were super successful what you did before with Indigo, not just as a company, also personally, you sold the company for sake of a round number, let's call it $1 billion, so it's not like you didn't manage to be super successful. Printing industry is not known to be very easy. Why are you coming back to the printing industry?
Well, I started Indigo 35 years ago and sold it to HP 10 years ago. And frankly, I never dreamt that I would get back into printing. What happened was that I started a new company called Landa Labs, and our objective was to develop a new technology for energy conversion. I know it sounds very pretentious, but really wanted to save the planet from global warming. So figuring out a way how to get low temperature thermal energy conversion to turn heat into useful electricity seemed like a very worthy and achievable goal. We had a technology for doing it. I hired dozens of world-class physicists and chemists, and we set out to do this. And it turned out that in order to make this happen, we needed to develop nanostructures, tiny little structures that are only a few nanometers in size. To make these, we needed special nanoparticles. So we looked around the world to find people who either had them or could make them or even would undertake developing them. We failed, so we had to develop our own way of making these nanoparticles. We succeeded and had this breakthrough technology, a new way to make nanoparticles. But because, I guess, of my DNA in printing, I said, hey, maybe this will work with pigments. We tried it, it worked, and it was just spectacular. And when I saw that, I said, hey, nanopigments are the holy grail for the future of printing. I really had no choice. I had to get back into printing. And so we started Landa Digital Printing, created nanography, which we launched at Drupa about 8 months ago, and we're on the way. And frankly, I was thrilled to get back into the printing industry because I missed it, really missed it. I've been in printing my whole life, and it's just in my, you know, I have ink coursing through my veins, and I just,
what is it in the industry that you miss? What's most? Is the people, the type of creativity?
Well, first of all, you know, when I try to describe to people what I'm doing, I grew up torn between art and science. And in my hometown, they would talk about engineers and people. If you ask them anything about what's happening in the world or what's happening in Eastern Europe, they would fumble around looking for their slide rules and say, oh, sorry, I left my slide rule at home. That was the image I had of a technologist. And so I thought, hey, being a creative, being an artist, being a writer, being a philosopher was much more valuable to society. And when I discovered that developing technology, that there is no more creative field than developing technology. You're like an orchestra conductor. All the pieces are the software and the chemistry and the optics and the electro-optics and the electronics, and and you put all that together and it's a symphony, and that's spectacular. So, developing technology is my life, and in the printing industry, when you make machines that make art, now you put these machines in the hands of creative, gifted people, and I know you must feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
You put software and you put tools and you enable them to make the most beautiful, stunning creations. It's a big thrill. So I love this industry. And the other thing I love about the industry is that I don't really feel that we have competitors who are enemies. In a lot of fields, your competitor's your enemy. If he's selling against me, I hate him. In this industry, somehow there's a tremendous amount of intimacy. People are competitors, but it's sort of we're sharing a mission. We're changing the world, and our enemy is the old way of doing things.
That's true.
And we are sort of collaborating in changing the industry. And I can't think of a single competitor who isn't a very close friend who I don't highly respect. I think it's mutual, and I love it. It's just a fantastic world to be in. I have to say, though, that our other world, nanotechnology, is also an amazing world. Because the stuff that we were doing in Landa Labs, from which the digital printing was spawned, is also fantastic. Because it's not just nanopigments. We should all realize that nanotechnology isn't just a lot of hype. Some of the stuff that we're doing is amazing for drug delivery systems, for example. We have some projects with some pharmaceutical companies, and there are whole families of new drugs that you can get to the organ that you need to get it to just by making the particles small enough to course through the veins and go through all the capillaries and get there. And that's possible with nanotechnology. And amazing new things are going to come out of nanotechnology. So my life is very full.
I want to come back to the other non-print applications of nano that you're working on, but I want to stay on print for some time. So what is it that we should expect from Landa's lab on the print? We've all been in Drupal, amazing demo. What's the timeline? When are we going to see something? What is that going to be?
Well, I don't know if everybody was at Drupa, but
that's true.
It's exciting because so I'll go back to the nanopigments. What the nanopigments enabled was a new kind of ink. This is a water-based ink, so it's green, that enables you to make images that are very, very thin, because nanopigments are very efficient absorbers of light. So you need a lot less pigment, you get much purer colors. So you get richer colors, a broader color gamut, using less materials. So now you can have a high-speed, totally environmentally friendly, economical process that produces images that are half as thick as the next as offset printing. And in the end, the cost of printing is really determined by how much stuff you use in the printing process, how much material you use. So this opened the door to high-speed, high-quality, low-cost digital printing. And so what you can expect from us is a new category of printing, which is digital printing for mainstream. So until now, digital printing has been focused primarily on very short run lengths or personalized products. For example, in the photo album space, I think 80–85% of the world's photo albums are all produced on indigos. And they're fantastic. High quality, the ultimate in personalization. Every pixel is personalized. This is your vacation, your family. But digital printing has only accounted for 2% of all the pages. It hasn't been able to penetrate the mainstream because of the economics. And the mainstream, of course, is offset. Offset economics are wonderful for long volumes, high volume, because you have this investment in printing plates and in make-ready. If you spread it over hundreds of thousands of pages, it's pretty cheap. But now, since the market is driving towards only a few thousand, shorter runs, neither offset can be profitable, nor digital can be profitable, and that's where nanography comes in. It's a very high-speed digital printing technology that enables economic production of mainstream printing. So large formats, high speed, and that's really where I guess the heavy lifting is done. You know, all of us come from all digital printing evolved from the office. And in the office, we started with letter-sized pages, and then went to 2 up, and the dream was to go to B2, to go to 4 up. That's coming from the office side, but from the commercial printing side, the mainstream commercial printing has always been very large formats, you know, B1, 8 up, and so that's where the technology needs to go. And right now we're alone in that space, and we don't see any other technology on the horizon that's going to share that space with us. So we don't relate to the other digital printing technologies or companies as our head-to-head competitors, but rather collaborators in converting the industry to digital.
So I want to go back to the landscape in a second, the competition, but first just on the time horizon. So when will be the printer? If somebody wants to buy it, when do you expect to have your first printer available?
We expect to ship our first machines into our beta customers at the very end of this year.
2013?
End of 2013.
And then you're going to take some time to test it?
Well, the testing takes place before it goes into the customer.
To see that they're successful with this.
Absolutely. 2014 will be a year of rising volumes and then full-scale high-end
There's going to be
production.
few models. It's not going to be just one.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. We showed at Drupa, we showed 7 models.
7 models.
Sheet-fed and web, from small B3 machines all the way up to the big B1 machines, and wide format web machines for packaging. So the entire range. But of course, we will start with our first introductions, which will be our large format sheet machines.
Okay. And that's going to be the end of this year?
That'll be the end of this year.
The beta sites were picked already? Or?
We have quite a number of customers in beta sites. At Drupa, we took about 430 orders. These were LOIs with a requirement for deposits, so that these are serious customers.
Sure.
And from all of those, we are selecting our beta sites now. Some will be in the States, some will be in Europe.
Yep. So I want to ask you just a question about testing. We just met a few customers, and one says, my father, 25 years ago, was one of the first to buy Indigo from you.
Right.
And he said he bought 2. Yeah. He says, because at that time we had to buy 2 to make sure we can run up. So that was at least the perception back in the early Indigo's days. So first of all, you can correct it for all of us here. But if that's the case, if you think that this time is going to be different, it's going to be much more reliable, or people will have to buy 2 to begin with?
First of all, they had to buy 2, not because of the reliability. They had to buy 2 because we couldn't afford to sell them less than 2. And the reason we couldn't afford it is, they used to say about the Indigo machines, you buy 2 machines, you get 3 crates. 2 big ones and a smaller one with breathing holes. The one with the breathing holes came with a full-time technician to take care of these 2 machines. So to pay for a full-time technician, you had to have 2 machines. But you know, you may laugh, and it really wasn't an extraordinary strategy, but it's what built Indigo. It's what created Indigo. Because how does a company start without a global service organization, without a support organization, without warehouses all over the world? How do you take orders from Des Moines, Iowa, and Buenos Aires, and anywhere in the world? Well, you don't need those organizations in place to begin with if the machines come with their own service personnel. So the service guy went with the machines, trained the customers' operators, and when in the same location we shipped additional machines, he was able to service those machines as well.
But I think in 2013, it's illegal to send a technician inside a crate. So what's the plan for the new printers? You have to buy 2 with the technician, or you can buy 1 without technician?
Neither. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
You can buy only 1, but you get the guy.
Get the guy.
You get the guy.
Very good.
It's the same strategy. We intend to ship all of our machines with personnel who will train the customer's operator, train the customer, and over time that person will be servicing additional machines, and it's a great strategy. See, but the other thing is that's different, is that in those days, it's true that we shipped 2 machines, and lucky because they weren't really that reliable. See, over the years, I've learned a few things, and I have made every mistake that's possible to make. And
I can share with you some mistakes I made that I don't think you made, but it's...
Well, I'll make them yet.
Okay, yeah.
So today I'm making new mistakes,
Okay, good.
but try not to make the same old ones.
Right.
And the mistake we made when we first started shipping the machines is we didn't know, we didn't realize, A, the market wasn't ready for digital. There was no demand from the end users. And nobody ever heard of digital, so of course there was no demand. The customers or service providers, they didn't know what to do with digital, and they didn't know how to create the market. These were not marketing companies. These are companies who were accustomed to somebody knocking on the door and saying, hey, can you print this for me, please? So they're accustomed to, they didn't even have sales forces for the most part. To them, marketing was putting a sign in the window saying, digital printing here. So they couldn't create the demand. And even those who could, the machines weren't reliable enough for them to build on, even if they had. Because in digital, you need to be up all the time. It's on demand. You can't wait 2 days to have the service engineer show up to fix the machine because you're promising the job delivered in 3 hours. So we made all those mistakes, and it took years to fix them. In the end, they were all fixed, and as everybody knows, it's all history. Indigo now is a billion-dollar business, and it's the market leader, 60% market share, and all the like. So this time we've learned that lesson as well, and the products won't ship to customers without being of highest offset quality and high reliability. So we're taking it nice and easy, nice and slow.
Excellent. So I like how you said that in this industry, the competitors are bonding together. But at the end of the day, when those images that are going to be printed on the Landa printer is going to be, if they're not on Landa printer, it's going to be, they are printed somewhere else. So you'll be competing on those images with either other digital machine or with offset. Who is that customers will have to make a decision between offset, Landa printer, or it will be more of the other inkjet, big one, or maybe Indigo? Or Xerox?
Guy, I don't really see it that way. And the reason is that today, the pain that the commercial printers are suffering, and the reason many of them don't make any money, there's a lot of companies going out of business, there's a lot of consolidation, and the reason is that their customers are driving them to shorter and shorter run lengths, and they can't make any money. So you must say to yourself, well, if they can't make any money from short-run jobs, why don't they just reject them? They'll do only long-run jobs. If they do that, then their customers will go to somebody else, and they'll lose them. So they have to do the short-run jobs, even if they lose money on them. That's where the pain is. Today, over half of the jobs are already under 5,000 B1 sheets. And that's a tremendous proportion of work which the commercial printers simply can't make money on. So it is, and because offset can't deliver the economics. So when I say we're not competing against offset, because offsets can be around for a very long time for the very long run length jobs, but we're complementing offset for this mainstream short to medium run lengths where offset cannot play. But the other digital technologies can't play there either. So no offset press owner who wants to go for this space is going to be wringing his hands saying, oh, do I buy a Landa or an iGen or an Indigo or something else? The others can't play in this space. Just the same as they're not going to be saying, if I do photo albums or short-run label printing, oh, do I buy an Indigo or do I buy a Landa? You know, every technology has its sweet spot. And for Indigo, the sweet spot is really the high-quality, personalized, short-run, customized jobs. For us, the sweet spot is mainstream offset printing in that area where offset is not profitable. So it really isn't that way.
Okay. You mentioned the offset. You also announced a Drupa partnership with Komori and some other companies. Is this also coming in?
Some other companies like Heidelberg.
Heidelberg, example.
Yes.
Yes. So is this also coming in the next 12 months, or that's maybe a little on?
Well, I can't speak for them, but I would expect that we will have the Landa branded presses in the market before our partners have their presses in the market.
So you're taking a very ambitious project.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of R&D. You have to get people to know the technology. We were all, at least a few of us went to Drupa, very impressed with the Landa booth. And so it's costing a lot of money. Is it self-funded? Are you raising money? It's going to cost a lot more money before it's become profitable.
Well, the past 10 years, I've been funding it myself and loving it. But now the opportunity is really so enormous and the scale is so huge that, yes, we are in the mode of raising additional funds in order to fund this massive growth. Same thing I did last time. I ended up taking Indigo public to do exactly the same thing. This time I've been private and I've been public. Private's better, so we're doing it privately this time. But yes, we are raising quite a lot of money because it's just an enormous opportunity, and an individual can't fund that kind of massive operation alone.
That's for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the industry. Let's talk about the death of printing.
About?
The death of printing, the end of printing.
Oh, yeah.
Frank alluded to the printless world. You know, we focus on areas of growth of printing, and I think we prove to the world that there's a lot of areas we're going very well. You and I talk to customers, their business never been better. But you know, at the end of the day, a number of pages are shrinking. There are fewer players, and some pages that used to be printed are no longer printed. What do you think are we going to see a lot more of that? What's the next 5 years for the industry?
Well, I think that you have to talk about the segments separately in the printing industry. Of the $800 billion value of printed goods sold, I think $200 billion is in publishing, about $300 in commercial, and $300 in packaging. So if we take them one at a time, I'm sorry to say, I think it's the writing's on the wall. Publishing, newspapers, books, directories, clearly that is going to be replaced quite rapidly by digital media. And so ignoring those two, not that there aren't opportunities in the interim as the publishing industry goes from printed media to digital media. There are many opportunities for digital printing, but those opportunities aside, yes, publishing is foredoomed to decline in favor of digital media. However, commercial printing is in the West declining very slowly, and it will continue to decline very slowly. In the developing world, it's growing, and so overall, it's more or less staying at that size. And I think it's going to stay that way for a very long time. And the reason is very simple. Printing is 600 years old, and man has been communicating on paper for 5,000 years. When 7 billion people communicate with paper for such a long time, it's such a deep-rooted part of the culture. The color, the taste, the feel, the texture, I mean, you can express your emotions, you can tear paper, you can burn it, you can fold it, you can keep it, it's intimate. There's so many cultural aspects to paper that it's not going to go away overnight. So commercial printing is going to be around for a very, very long time. Also, you can push with paper. You can push through the mail. You can push by handing things out. You can have brochures, flyers, things that are going to be difficult to replace with digital media in our lifetime. So commercial will be around for a very long time. Packaging. Packaging is really everything that's sold in a supermarket or a drugstore is printed packaging. Packaging is exploding. In the West, it's growing at the GDP or faster because families are shrinking, you need more smaller packages. Digital, the internet enables you to differentiate more, to target more. Branding needs to be more differentiated. So even in the West, it's growing. And in the developing world, you add to those same factors urbanization. In the developing world, when the Chinese farmers moved from the village to the city, now instead of buying their food in the open market, they buy it in a supermarket. So notwithstanding the enormous GDP growth in the developing world, especially in China, packaging grows even faster than the GDP grows. So we are going to have a world that is printed for a very, very long time. And just listen to the numbers that I just said. I said it's $800 billion, and if you eliminate publishing, it's $600 billion. If you eliminate commercial printing, it's $300 billion and growing. How many hundreds of billions does an industry have to be before it's just so huge it's over the horizon? So I don't think that we are going to see a world that is devoid of printing. Not in our lifetimes, not in our children's lifetimes. It's going to be around for a very, very long time. And cornflakes aren't going to come wrapped in digital media.
No. We agree. So you touched a little bit about emerging worlds, and you said the commercial is actually growing there and packaging. So can we get the sense that you have a different strategy maybe for that market? You're going to be more focused on, let's say, China or Brazil or India or areas like that?
No, I don't think so. I think that, of course, the rate of growth is greater in the Far East, in the developing world, but the size of the markets are still staggering in North America and in Europe and Eastern Europe and in Latin America. So, no, our focus has to be really global.
I see. Maybe it's a self-serving question, but in all of that digital printing, what do you think about the importance of workflow?
Of?
Workflow.
Workflow?
Yeah, you know.
You really picked the right guy. I'll tell you, everything I know about workflow, I learned this morning from a presentation. Udi Arieli has this animated thing. It was really quite fantastic. Lucky I saw it, I wouldn't be prepared to answer your question. But
it wasn't a short presentation, let me guess that.
I don't know, it was a long, and there's 7 chapters, and it's and wonderful graphics, and I suggest you all see it. But ask me another question. Workflow, this is not my... You know, as Ronald Reagan said when he was asked about something about the wall in Eastern Europe, he said, listen, it's not my field. So it's not my field. It's not my strength.
So I want to go back to Landa and Ventures Labs and you. Right. And you mentioned you came back because your experience of printing was so good. But you started Indigo way before that. What was the first reason you got drawn to the world of printing?
Well, I think I was born in printing. I mean, I feel like I was born in printing.
Some of us feel like that too.
I don't remember. I mean, from the time I was a child, I was involved in imaging. My father, my family were immigrants. I was born in Poland. We moved to Canada after the war. And I was born after the war. My parents were Holocaust survivors. So we moved to Canada, and my father was a carpenter. And my mother was a seamstress, and I grew up in a very poor home, but very great home, loving home. And my father, after a while, sold his carpentry tools and bought a cigar store, tobacco store, magazines, cigarettes. And he didn't have enough money to buy the photo studio that the owner of the store had. So he had to buy it without the photo studio, and the guy used to take passport photos. And it turns out that the tobacco magazines paid the rent and the electricity, but barely more than that. So my father, who had no education, he had 3 years of education, barely spoke English. In fact, when I went to kindergarten and they asked all the kids, what did you have for breakfast? Since I learned English from my parents, I said, I had corn flakes. And laughed out of the kindergarten. Anyhow, so my father bought this tobacco store, and he was an inventor in his own right, very creative guy, great with his hands. And the basement in the store was full of all sorts of mechanical things. There were the lamps and lenses and chemicals and papers. And he invented, in the early 50s, when I was 7, 8 years old, he invented a photo booth, in which he took paper, a roll of paper, and bicycle chains and sprockets, and he built this booth. It was like a phone booth, and behind it was a dark room. With this machine, this wall, it was all fluorescent lights. And between some of the lights, he had a lens with a leather lens cap. And behind the wall, in the dark room, was the machine with the bicycle chains and the sprockets and everything. These 3 rods sticking out. One would advance the paper, one would cut the paper, and the other one would open the trapdoor to where the papers would nest for development. So this fantastic machine, and that's when I got first involved in photography. And because he really knew nothing about photography, he took direct positive pictures. In other words, photographs right onto the paper without a negative. And so it was called direct positive. And he used to open this photo booth, and he had these fluorescent lights, and people would come in to have passport photos taken, or my hometown in Edmonton was called the Gateway to the North. So all sorts of miners and uranium miners and oil riggers would come there for job applications. They needed photos, so they would come and have their photos taken. And because he didn't have a negative, every photo was an original. So he would take off this lens cap, he'd count 1, 2, 3, close the lens cap. That's a 2-second exposure on a human being. So they had to be absolutely still while they're taking this photograph. And I would help him. I had this, he would send me to the wholesaler to bring the chemicals with a label from one of the boxes. And I would bring the chemicals, and he would bring this powder that he put in this big 5-gallon glass jug, and it said stir for 2 hours. And he would sit with a stick in the thing and stir it. And so I took an old phonograph motor and put a rubber tube on it and cut the end so that it would be like a brush, a broom, and put it on the bottle and turned the motor on, and it stirred the stuff. And my father went crazy. He was thrilled with his son. He dragged people in off the street. A policeman, he would drag anybody off the street. Look at my son's invention. So I was tied to printing and imaging from the time I was a child. And I had this fantastic example of my father, who was a great inventor, notwithstanding his educational limitations. In fact, can I tell you a little story about it?
Yes, of course.
So he had this machine, and he made passport photos. And then the passport office in Ottawa changed the regulations. They said, okay, the photos can now not be glossy, they have to be matte. But the only paper he had that he ever sent me to buy was, to deliver from the warehouse, was glossy. So he was a carpenter, so he took this wood vise, he laminated on the faces of the vise this rubberized fabric, he soaked the photos in vinegar to soften the emulsion, put them in the vise, pressed them for a couple of hours, that embossed them, made them matte enough, and the passport office accepted it. And then they changed the rules again. And now the rules said, instead of having just a plain photo, you had to have a frame around it, and the bottom had to be wide so you could sign a signature. So a white frame. Now, how do you do this? No, you have a negative, and you have what's called a light box. You have these metal shims that mask part of the negative, and then you just put paper on top and you expose it, so you end up masking the frame, because it's a negative, where it's masked, it ends up being a white frame. But in his case, these are all originals. So, and it's direct, how would he make a frame? But he was a carpenter, so what he did, he took a huge sheet of plywood, cut a frame in it, painted it white, hung it by chains from the ceiling, and every time somebody came in to have their picture taken, he'd pull this frame aside, people would sit in there, they're sticking their heads in their bodies in this torso in the frame, he'd photograph them together with the frame, and it worked. I'll tell you another story. Yes. So one day, we get it, because on the back of each photo was a stamp from the store. So we got a letter from the patent office, and he said, "Dear sir, I got one of your passport photos, and I'm not writing in my official capacity as a clerk in the Canadian Passport Office, but I too am an amateur photography, and I love trick photography, and I have to ask you, how did you do the photo in which the tie was outside the frame?"
Before Photoshop.
Yeah, so I grew up in this environment. You know what I have to tell you? That was 55 years ago. And I look back on my life and I say to myself, you know, I'm not a religious person. But somehow, when I look back on how I started with my father and this story, and what I did in my life, what I do to this day, I do what my father did. Take images without the need for intermediates, for films and for plates, go directly from the image to paper. And that's what we do. And it's as though, you know, we all think we have a free will and we decide what we do. And somehow it seems that, you know, there's somebody guiding all this. Otherwise, how is it possible that the loop would close in that way from the time I was 8, 9 years old until now? It's extraordinary.
Extraordinary, indeed. So if I look at those stories, including the tie outside of the frame,
yeah.
How is that bringing you to start a company like Indigo?
Oh, I started Indigo for totally different reasons. When I was a student, I mentioned I was torn between science and technology. It really tore me apart.
And art, science and art.
So science and art.
Yeah.
Between humanity and pumps, you know, mechanics, and it really tore me apart. And so I went to see a friend of mine, a much older man, told him my story, and I said, because when I was studying physics and engineering at university, and I was bored to tears, and I'd go home and I'd write stories and poems. Then I switched to psychology and literature, and I found myself in the perception lab doing flash experiments on perception in the eye. It was just a torn youth. I just didn't know what in the world I wanted. And so this guy said, "Hey, Benny, I know the answer. Study filmmaking." I said, "Filmmaking? What's it? It's technological, it's communicative, you can influence the world, you can influence society, it's creative and all this." So I went to study movie making, discovered I have no talent in that, but I did get a job in a microfilm research company, and that opened my eyes. Suddenly I discovered nirvana for me, that technology and art are one and the same, and it's the most creative thing you can do for me. So I loved that, started a company in England, it went public, became the largest European micrographics company. I ended up with a little bit of money. So I moved to Israel, started Indigo, and managed to fund Indigo for the first 6 years. And what I wanted to do with Indigo was develop color copiers. Well, there was no market for color copiers, so we started developing black and white copiers. And so for the first 6 years, we worked on developing photocopiers. And I have another story to tell you if you want in that context.
No, absolutely. That's the right time to tell stories.
Oh, you want to tell a story?
Yeah.
Okay,
please.
so how do we start in photocopiers? Well, we had this technology which I developed in England for microfilm, and we started developing a photocopier. And it was a black and white photocopier, and what I really wanted was to get a customer. I wanted to get a client, somebody who would want this thing. So there was an American company called Savin Corporation. In those days, it was an independent company. And their chairman of the board was a guy named Paul Charlap, an amazing guy. And I tried forever to try and get him to come and see us. Finally, we convinced the guy to show up. He came. We had like a dozen employees, a 3,000 square foot place. And we had all sorts of things. We had early versions of word processors and printers and scanners and documents, all sorts of fantastic stuff. He absolutely loved it. He went crazy. He thought it was the greatest place. And I thought for sure he was going to say, "Hey, Benny, let's do business," and he left. And I wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month passes, and finally he calls me on the phone. I'm in Israel, and he says, "Benny, I really loved what I saw. I've booked you and your wife a suite at Claridge's in London next weekend. Will you join us?" So I said to myself, "Well, a week with the Charlaps in London? Of course we'll join you." So I brought my wife, and he brought his lawyer. He told me the story of Sav and the history with Ricoh, and he never wants to be dependent on Ricoh again, and he wants somebody to develop the next generation of copiers. That's us. I was blown away. I said, "Sure, that's terrific." He said, "Oh, the only thing is you have to move to America." I said, "Well, you know, Paul," so I talked him out of it. He said, "Okay, we'll give you a short R&D contract. Here are the terms." We negotiated the terms then and there on the spot. His lawyer and he and I. I go back to Israel. 2 weeks later, the phone rings. I never had a lawyer, of course. 2 weeks later, the phone rings. The guy says, "Benny, contract's ready. Come to New York. Let's sign." I come to New York, walk into his office. There he is. The lawyer is sitting in the same lawyer sitting in the chair. Paul hands me this document. He says, "Here's the contract. Read it. Let's sign." I said, "Sure, I'll take it. You know, I'll get a lawyer. We'll talk." No. Read it now. Let's sign. I said, "Wait, what do you mean? Read it now? Right here?" So yes, read it. So I'm sitting there. They're both glaring at me, glaring at me, and I'm sitting there starting to read one page at a time. I get to like the third page. I guess I blanched. I said to him, "Paul, you know, there's something wrong here. The terms in this contract are not what we had negotiated. These are much more favorable for us than the deal we negotiated." And he said to me, "Yeah, I know, Benny. The problem with you is you don't know how to negotiate, and I have to do it for both of us." The reason I tell you this story is that gesture won my heart, and he and I became the closest of intimate friends till the day he died. And it was such a life lesson that he taught me, which was the best deal you can do in life is not the deal which, on the face of it, is the best deal, but the one in which the other side feels that they're getting the best deal. And over time I learned it doesn't matter if the other side is a vendor, a customer, an employee, a boss, a spouse, it always works. The other side has to get the best deal. And that became the cornerstone philosophy of Indigo.
I want you to remember that if we ever negotiate anything. But so that's remarkable. So how is that, again, where is Indigo in all this story? How did you move to? Yeah.
So we started developing copiers, and for the first 6 years, and they were our client, and I funded it, and they participated in part of the development. And after 6 years, we had this breakthrough of electro ink. And I said to him, and I said to our guys, hey, you know what? Copiers are terrific, but if this magic ink can replace toner in photocopiers, maybe it can also replace ink in printing machines and make offset printing digital. And then we switched, we abandoned copiers and started developing the world's first digital offset color printing press. That took another 10 years. So this is like from 1983 to 1993. So for all those 16 years, except for the money I had at the beginning, this company had no investors, no venture capitalists, no government funding, no loans, no grants, no products, and no revenue.
But other than that, it was a great place.
Great. So how did we finance 16 years of R&D? The most amazing thing happened. When we were developing these copiers, you know, the core technology was this liquid ink copier process. But because it could enable you to do copies at 100, 120 pages a minute, and in those days, copiers went like 15, 18 pages a minute, we had to develop enabling technologies. How to scan documents at high speed, how to feed documents at high speed, how to feed sheets of paper at high speed. And then over the years, as the copier industry learned to make their machines faster and faster, every one of these companies stepped on our patents. And because the patents were very strong, patents are like a minefield. If you step on one, you pay a price. And so every copier company in the world, Xerox, Ricoh, Mita, Minolta, Canon, Kodak, every copier company in the world became an Indigo licensee, and something in every copier was made under license from Indigo. That brought in $200 million in license fees. That's what took us to the launch of the ePrint 1000 in 1993.
And then you ran Indigo all the way to 2000, I think? Or?
Till 2002.
2002 when you sold it to HP. So,
and now I've done the same thing again. You spent my own money developing the next generation, and now we're seeking additional funding so that we can take it further.
My guess, you're not going to sell it to HP in 10 years. But
pardon me?
You're not going to sell it to HP to 10 years. But
no, I don't think so.
But you're going to run it for, so is this the game plan? You're going to take it public at some point? You're going to run it, you're ready to run it for another 10 years and maybe sell it? Or?
What else am I going to do? I mean, this is my life. Yes, I'm going to run this business. I love it. Thankfully, I'm back in the printing industry, and yes, this is the game.
I want to tell you, can I tell us your story?
Sure.
This is to remind me something. So just before that, I was on the phone with a billionaire in Silicon Valley. Everybody may know him, and he's in the real estate, and I asked for his advice on tiles printing because we print on tiles and construction. So he's really helpful. And the guy is, we don't pay him anything, and he's given us a lot of great advice. And I said on the phone, I said, look, I'm really appreciate all the time that you spend helping EFI understanding construction. And he says, hey, Guy, it's either that or completing my Sudoku. I'd rather help EFI. So I kind of find the answer similar, but it's interesting. So 2002, you sell to HP, and you go, I think you invest in a few companies, you took your money, you took some time off, started Landa's Lab.
I didn't take time off.
Okay. Weekend off?
No.
Okay, wasn't even a weekend. Okay. We're going to get back to this. I'm going to challenge you on this time. Anyway, so you disappear from the printing industry at least.
Right.
And then you're coming back 2012, 2015. Right. What changed in the industry? I mean, you have a great opportunity because to reflect on this because you were gone and now you come back. Is the industry the same? Or?
No, of course not. Look, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, the industry was still booming. And if you look at the major players in the industry, not just the customers, but the vendors, they've been decimated, especially the past 5 years, but also the past 10 years. The leading press vendors, I mean, for 600 years, the top 3 printing companies in the world were German companies, you know, Heidelberg, Manroland, KBA. Manroland's gone bankrupt. Heidelberg in the past 5 years has lost half of its revenue and 97% of its stock price. The industry is decimated as a reflection of, I think, the customer reality. The customer reality is that because of the fear of digital media, because of the poor economy, because of the fear that buying an offset press is going to be an obsolete investment, customers aren't buying. And it's not that the capacity isn't needed, it is needed. If you look at the decline in the total number of pages, which has been very small, compared to the extreme decline in the purchase of printing presses, right. There's been this enormous gap created. So there's tremendous potential for printing presses that are viable, that can print profitably.
But at the same time, people spending money on other things, some on software, which we like, workflow, ask Udi Arieli, on things that print on carpets or big boards and so on. We see it in our
ceramics.
Ceramics, labels. So it's maybe it was just shifting, like we talked about the window of opportunities. Maybe just, you know, people don't spend anymore on Walkman, they spend on the iPod.
Yes, but I mean, printing is so vast that, and it will continue, that you can't have, it's like when there was this big gap between the interest rates and the prime. So these things in the end have to close. Okay. And so you can't have a sustained period where commercial printers just don't buy printing equipment and they're still, the volumes continue to be the same or grow. So that's going to have to change. But I think the big issue is, what are they going to buy? And there's still a huge, huge opportunity in capital equipment, in printing, which is where we are. But another thing that has changed dramatically, and we see it now especially in the past couple of years, is the nature of the customers has changed. In those days when we were selling 2 boxes, our presses sold for $350,000, $400,000, $500,000. Today, digital presses, the high-end presses, sell for a lot more money, and the customer base has changed. Because of all these consolidations and smaller companies going out of business, now you don't have, for a press like ours, you don't have 400,000 customers like we had for the original presses. Now you have fewer commercial printers, and today we know who all these customers are because they're counted in thousands or perhaps a few tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. So that has had an impact on the way you want to market. We've recently seen HP, Heidelberg, Agfa, Xerox, and Landa all announced that they're not going to be showing at IPEX. It's nothing to do with IPEX. It's to do with the way in which the industry is evolving. You don't go to an open-air market to meet bluebirds who fly in the window. You know all your customers. There are better ways, and I think your event here is one of them, better focused ways of communicating with your target customers than going to just a general open-air fair, especially when these international fairs. Nobody can afford to have these fairs, major global trade shows, every 2 years. Just is not going to continue.
Do you think we're going to see a continued decline of that? We will see Drupa show to, well, I think there's a decision to do a show to Drupa. We will see more than 5 years of Drupa. We see more decline in shows.
And yes, and you will see a lot of out of the box marketing approaches. The way we communicate with all of our customers, for example, we have 400 and something customers from Drupa who've placed orders for these machines, and we communicate them through digital media, through social media, Skype, internet. I mean, just the way in which you relate to customers and communicate with them. We have a fantastic team that's leading that, and it works very well. And things are changing, and we have to keep up with these changes. One of them is the way in which the customers and the vendors meet and interact.
I see. So, you know, I want to go back to something you mentioned when you started the Landa Labs. Your goal was not printing, and you still have some applications that are non-printing.
Oh, yes.
I mean, what are the most exciting things you think you can do with your technology outside of printing?
Well, the core breakthrough that we had was this way of making small nanoparticles. So that's been a key for the energy conversion. Now, don't hold your breath. We're not going to have products in this field of apparently free, endless, boundless energy for a few years yet. We've been working on it for 10 years. We have a team of like 60 scientists, brilliant guys working on it. The good thing is everyone are believers, and we have seen signs of life. It'll take another perhaps 5 years before we actually have a product that can do something useful from thermal energy extracted from the environment. So that's a dream. That is a fantastic direction, and it's keeping us all awake at night. But there are some other spin-offs. For example, drug delivery, which is a very exciting spin-off. Cancer medications and others that can be delivered much more effectively through nanoparticles that can target the organs rather than, because some drugs just aren't soluble in water. You can't dissolve them to get into the bloodstream. The only way you can get them there is to make them small enough to get to the target organ. So that's very exciting. Then there's, we have one spin-off that's fantastic. It's already using this nanotechnology, and I can tell you about it. It's a secret, so don't tell. If none of you tell, I can promise you won't say anything. I can share the secret with you. Actually, I'll give you a hint first. Everything that can become digital will become digital. Hair color is no exception. We have a technology, a subsidiary company, that is digitizing hair color. Now, you might be surprised.
I always wanted to have red.
Well, I have to tell you, almost all of the women in the world color their hair.
No.
Every one of them is unhappy with the results, yes. And that's the opportunity. Digitizing hair color is going to totally change the hair color industry. And this is not something that's in the distant future. Within this coming year, 2013, you're all going to hear all about it because it's a very big deal.
You're taking industrial printing to the next level, I'm telling you. I'm gonna.
And nanotechnology is useful for other things, for catalysts, for pyrotechnics, there's huge opportunities for nanotechnology, and that's what we specialize in Landa Labs.
Very interesting. You may get some deposits tonight for the hair coloring.
Great.
Yeah. So I want to switch a little bit from printing just to what you see in the world. You know, there's a lot of talk about global economy. Is it the worst behind us in Europe, in the world, the US? We like the drama recently, so who knows what's going to happen with our debt and deficit and all of that. What do you think is going to happen in 2014 as far as global economy?
Why don't you ask me about workflow?
That's a good one.
Next question.
All right, I'll try another topic.
No clue.
No clue.
No.
I think, okay, well, Udi, I think, has a chapter 8 about it. So, I know that it's a topic that you care about, and it's a big topic in the US, and the issue is inequality. And it actually got a lot worse because of the technology we have around, because it helped more educated people, people that are closer to the action, whether it's worsted and so on, to become a lot richer, and actually people that were born, unfortunately, to families that couldn't afford education in many cases, got away from where the money is, at least in the US, as manufacturing job left the US. I think it's a big deal for the US. I know you care a lot about it. Israel was in the news because there was actually demonstrations about how expensive the real estate is. So what's the story there? What do you think about it? What are you doing about it? What should we all do about it?
Well, I can't comment about inequality in America. I don't know it firsthand. In Israel, we have a very serious situation of huge, growing socioeconomic gaps between the educated and the less educated, between the establishment and the new immigrants. Israeli Arab community, for example, is really left behind and not developing at the same rate as the rest of the society. And no society can leave entire segments behind. And so we have a fund called the Landa Fund. In fact, Mimi Sella is right here. She runs the Landa Fund for us. And while we're there, that's Ila Bialystok, who runs our marketing, and Christoph, who runs our U.S. sales, and Kobe, where are you? It doesn't matter. Kobe Omer there is a worldwide director of sales. Any of you want to meet them later, by all means do. And I say that because I apologize. I'm not going to be here. And if anybody does want to learn more, our guys are here. In the front row, you can meet them all later. But what I started saying is that in Israel, the socioeconomic gaps, in my opinion, you know, before I moved to Israel, I thought, hey, the big threat to the future of Israel was the external threat, the exogenous threat. You know, enemies from without Iran, the Arab countries surrounding it. That isn't the biggest threat that we've had. The biggest threat we face is the internal inequalities in our society. So for the past 10 years, we've had a huge focused effort on trying to close these gaps. And so our fund is called the Landa Fund for Equal Opportunity Through Education. We identify what we call youth of privileged minds and underprivileged means, kids who have the potential to do great things, but live in communities where they don't have the support, where they don't have the money. They're just unable to get to university, and we put them through college, and we've had thousands of kids. We've invested over $50 million in the past 10 years, putting these kids from these communities who otherwise wouldn't have a chance, and we just give them life. And it's a fantastic program. Well, thank you. Thank you.
So now on the other side of this, you know, there's a lot of money in Israel, a lot of wealth, because Israel is such a hub for high tech. Yeah. And I get this question a lot, and I have an answer, but I'd love to hear your answers. And the question is, what makes Israel, a relatively small country, #2 country as far as companies on NASDAQ, in some years, in the last few years, there were more VC money going to Israel than the entire European continent. Yeah. Why Israel?
Well, I don't think I have a monopoly on the answer. I have my own view as to why it is. I'd be eager to hear what your opinion is. But I think there are a number of factors which converge to make Israel really quite an extraordinary place in that regard. I think one of them, related to the last question, is the fact that every Israeli child, from the day he's born, from the day he understands, knows that he's going to spend, men 3 years and women 2 years, serving his country. America is fortunate to have a volunteer army. Israel, we have conscription. Every citizen serves in the army. And when you grow up in that environment, there's a very deep psychological learning that you have from that, which is, hey, there's something in life, unquestioned, that you know you are destined to do. It has nothing to do with yourself, your family, your bank account, your career. There's a higher purpose than just yourself in life. And when the kid gets to the army, here's an army that is a military service that is among the technologically most advanced, perhaps the most advanced in the world. So they're exposed very early on to the most advanced technology, from code-breaking software to communications, and so you combine those two in a country that has just chutzpah. Chutzpah means just nerve, just disrespect. I mean, there's something, it's a lack of acceptance of convention, of authority, of red lights, of, you know, and Israelis just do not, they just do not accept. You know, there was a stand-up, there's a Jewish New York comedian, a racist comedian who called Jackie Mason. I'm sure some of you have heard him. So he came to Israel, did a stand-up, and he said, you know, I've only been here a week, but already I can tell you, I really feel sorry for the CEOs in this country. He said, you ask an American about his CEO, and he says, oh, we're following his vision. We're following her direction. You ask an Israeli about his CEO, he says, him, that schmuck, what does he know? Lucky he's got me. So
that happened actually in America too.
So there's a lack of acceptance of the establishment, lack of acceptance of authority, and lack of acceptance of facts. So if you don't accept that, hey, this is the way things are done, you think out of the box. You think differently, and I'm entitled to do things differently than the way things are done. So innovation, being a maverick, thinking out of the box, I think that's a really Israeli characteristic, very much in common with Americans, but I think even more liberated, because Americans are a little more respectful than Israelis. So I think all of that combined makes Israel a real hotbed for technology.
That's normally very close to what I would say. The other thing in the army is you learn to take risk because sometimes you have to. The worst thing is not to do anything. And compared to the risk in the army, risk in business seems very trivial.
Right.
And then the element of leadership. I went to an officer's school. I learned so much about leadership. I don't think in any MBA school I would learn so much. I owe a lot to what I did there. At that time, I was miserable, but now, after that, I learned a lot. And so I think you learn a lot from that, and that's definitely...
Well, they say that Israelis are now developing more Western ideas and being less altruistic. In fact, they say about Israelis, they're willing for their country to give up their lives, but no less.
I have some other Israeli jokes, but for another time. Anyway, they say that we Israelis are extremely good listeners, especially when we talk. But you and I are showing today that we listen well. So you talked about high tech in Israel, but also for printing. You know, Indigo came from Israel, Cytex, EFI Arazi, the founder of EFI, also founded Cytex. There's a lot of printing innovation. Is there any connection, or it's just by accident?
Well, I think if you look at Silicon Valley, you know, all the electronics industry spawned with Fairchild and then Intel, and one company spawned another. I think the same thing happened in Israel. It started with EFI Arazi, with Cytex, and then he also formed EFI, of course. And there were spin-offs. There was Aprion. There were Noor ended up in part a spin-off from EFI, and Indigo started in printing. I mean, from Cytex. Cytex was in pre-press. Indigo was the first one in printing, and then there are spin-offs from Indigo and Cytex.
Well,
for example,
XMPi, that's Xerox bought later.
XMPi, Scodex is Indigo and Noor. Hycon is Indigo. So it's sort of one.
What is? You think just because there is a legacy? It's because it started with you and EFI, and now it's just people follow that.
Yeah, I think it's just a natural evolution of the way in which it works that way everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look in northern Germany, there's one area where all the flexo cylinders are done. Yeah. They're just one after the other, all the little villages, one beside the other. They all come from one part of the world. There are a lot of industries like that. So this hotbed in Israel is printing.
I'm going to talk to you about risk-taking. I'm going to take a risk with you and ask you a question that there is a 50-50 at least chance you're going to tell me, ask you about workflow. So you're talking about, I tried to get you to talk about global economy, and you talked about the external, in a different answer, the external risk to Israel. There's one thing that could impact the global economy is if Israel decides to take decisive action against Iran. Mm-hmm. Do you think that will happen? Do you have any thoughts about that, or workflow?
No, I clearly have thoughts about that. I think it would be, I hope it's not going to happen in the near future. I hope that Iran gets contained. But I can tell you one thing. If Iran is not contained, no responsible Israeli government would not take action. I mean, Israel was born of the Holocaust, and there's no Israeli government. One thing the Jewish people have learned, which is when a despot threatens you, and he writes in a book in 1933, in Mein Kampf, this is what I'm going to do, you take him seriously. And when a despot says, I'm going to wipe you off the map, all I need is the weapons to do it, you must take him seriously. So I hope the world takes Iran seriously, and that Iran is stopped from developing a nuclear weapon. But one thing is absolutely certain in my mind: if the rest of the world does not stop Iran from developing a weapon, Israel will. And
so, saying if we know that Iran has a weapon, we should assume that the attack is imminent.
It's a matter of survival. You cannot. Who could, with the history, the recent history. I mean, my family's history, with the history the Jews have had in such a situation, who in the world could ever take a chance and say, "Oh, he's bluffing"? He can be bluffing when he doesn't have the means to deliver on his promise. But nobody. I mean, and I'm a left wing. No, but I don't think there's anyone who thinks that Israel should not act if that's the only choice. I hope that America and others act before Israel needs to.
Okay, it's very interesting. Better than workflow this time. Anyway, so I'm glad I took the risk on that. So I have my last question or topic, and I refuse to accept that you don't have a private life or personal life or hobbies. So we want to talk more about Benny Landa. So do you have any hobbies? What do you do when you don't think about nanotechnology?
This is a trick question. I know it's a trick question, because I used to ask the question myself. Every time I would interview somebody, I would encourage them to talk about their work and what they do and all that. And then at the end of the interview, I would say to them, what, that's all you know is work? Don't you have a hobby? Don't you have a life? And if their eyes would light up and say, yes, I'm a golfer, I'm a sailor, thank you, interview's over. No, thank you, you're not for us. Because I regard myself as the coach, the team coach. And yes, people are, I want the other team to have the guys with the hobbies. I want my team,
Sounds like you.
for their hobby to be their work. For them to get up every morning, jump out of bed and say, oh, thank God it's a weekday. I get to do what I most love. And for me, and people ask me, are you going to retire? I am retired. I've been retired my whole life. I am doing what I most love. And I've been doing it my whole life, and I will never retire, and I don't have hobbies, no.
Okay, I'm going to try in a different way. By the way, some people I think that work for EFI may say, this is where he got the no life, only work, fun. Anyway. So do you have an iPod or MP3 player?
I finally got an iPhone. But I'm not a gadget.
So do you listen to music?
Not much, no.
When you listen, what do you listen to?
Well, because my wife is crazy about, what's his name from Montreal? Help me out. Who? Who?
Mike. You play.
No. Who is it? We went to his concert in Venice. What's his name?
You're a big fan, no question.
No, I'm big my boy. So I listened to that.
Okay.
Leonard Cohen.
Leonard Cohen. All right. Even I know.
Right. So my wife is a Leonard Cohen freak, so I happen to listen to Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
But I've had the same thing with sports. My brother used to listen to the radio all the time, and he used to listen to hockey. We grew up in Canada. And so I had another one of these cornflakes situations where all the guys in the class were saying, who's your favorite hockey player? And I never had any interest whatever in sports, but I hear the radio in the background all the time. So they got to me, I said, Frank Filchuk. And they started laughing. He was a referee. I just knew his name.
Was a good referee.
So Leonard Cohen's my favorite musician.
Was a good referee. Why criticize him? Okay. I will try in a different way. Do you read books?
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of books do you
read?
Not nanotechnology, please. Some other books.
Mostly I do read technology books and patents and science and a little bit of science fiction, but no.
What books do you have? I mean, you have like a couple of names.
No, you're really going to embarrass me. I'm not an intellectual. I mean, my wife is the book reader. I'm telling you, she listens to music, she reads books. She should be sitting right here now and answering your questions.
We may need to talk to her. So what about movies? You watch movies?
The last memorable movie I saw, some of you may remember this, it was in the late 70s, called Debbie Does Dallas. You know that movie, anybody? So,
okay.
You got any?
Okay. Workflow. Okay.
So tell me something. Got any more great questions?
No.
Do you have a lawyer?
I do have a couple of lawyers. Thank God they're here. I did not ask. Anyway, so no, it's fantastic. So you do have hobbies. That's okay. All right. I don't think I can top that.
Okay.
So, Benny, I know you came from Israel, and I personally know how far that is. And you go back, and we cannot be more delighted to have you here. And please come back to Connect. And thank you very much. It was fantastic for all of us. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.